Okay.
Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to another episode of Wild's the Dome. Today I have a very special guest. You not too many things he doesn't do. MC, author, activist, educator. You've seen him out in the street building. You've seen him on YouTube. You've seen him on TV. The God is a historian and just all around intelligent brother, man. And we always appreciate you coming through, God. So Saladin Allah, I appreciate you, God.
Peace, God. I appreciate you too, G.
All right. Okay. So yeah. It
Yeah.
looks okay. Looks like we had a little bit of technical difficulties. You're all right now. All right. So yeah, but like I was
Okay.
building with you off camera, I you know, I appreciate when I first ran into your YouTube channel probably about 10 years ago. Um, your ability to explain certain concepts within our supreme mathematics and expound on them. And today's mathematics being wisdom, one's wise words, ways, and actions, the application of our knowledge, also the bridge between knowledge and understanding. I wanted to just, get back into that and if you can share with the people, how you see today's math and expound on the concept of wisdom for those, who are actually seeking knowledge and understanding and self-realization.
Peace, God. So today being the second is symbolic to wisdom in our supreme mathematics. And the beautiful thing about wisdom is that it doesn't necessarily have to be explained.
Mm.
You live long enough, you're going to learn the difference between what is a wise decision as opposed to what is a foolish decision.
Mm.
And I think those who have been in proximity to us as the 5% or who have learned different things from us as the 5%, that's important to understand that supreme mathematics or our supreme alphabet are not concepts that are just made up out of thin air. They're actually observations of nature, principles and characteristics that we just simply observed and we organized in a certain way that allow and improve our quality of life.
Mm. Right.
So we don't have ownership of these principles in life, but the arrangement and the way in which we organize them is a part of our own particular intellectual property, if I could say that.
Right.
So when we come together and we build on supreme mathematics or the alphabet or today's degree, that's no different than a scientific community coming together and sharing their research with one another to get insight into what they've actually been applying to their lives. So when we say, how do you see today's mathematics? That's one scientist to the next sharing their research in life.
Right.
And all of our interactions with one another should be something that becomes an asset and not a liability. Because a lot of times, just people in general, when they come together, they may not really see the true value of their time and their interactions with each other. And we may tend to associate with people or have certain type of relationships where it's actually a liability. You're not gaining anything from those type of relationships. So that in itself is one example of wisdom. Wisdom being right discernment or right judgment to properly judge the type of relationships that we strive to establish and whether or not it's an asset to us or is this relationship a liability, right?
Right.
So wisdom, as you said, being wise words, ways, and actions, is the ability to learn and to use what we know to make better decisions.
Indeed.
And that's not anything that somebody has to be browbeat about or they need to be convinced about, or as 5%, we're not out here being missionaries.
Right.
It's not necessary to convince
No,
people.
we're not proselytizing, right?
Exactly. That's why you don't see us in religious spaces because what we stand upon is really not debatable. The calendar will take care of everything that we're saying. You live long enough and you see for yourself. And that's the best way for a person to actually learn something because they're living it on their own and they're coming to their own conclusions. And that's what scientists of life actually do.
Actual
Everything
facts.
that I'm actually sharing is really just demonstrating some of the discernment that I've learned over the years of just living. And that's one thing we strive to share with others, and to be open and receptive to what others have to share with us.
Indeed.
Right.
That's God, and not to cut your wisdom, but I appreciate the use of the word discernment, right? Because this is one of the qualities of wisdom that I also, whenever I build, that I also bring up, especially in our academic endeavors. We've gotten to a point now where information is so easily accessible that I've seen even people who consider themselves wise fall victim to information that is not right and exact whatsoever. And if you were actually using proper discernment, you might have, looked at that and said, okay, this is not adding up, and been able to just, move on to the next thing. But
Mm-hmm.
to go down that rabbit hole and then actually gain belief and think that you have an understanding of a said topic based off of information that is, can be proven wrong easily,
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of cases shows a lack of discernment, which is in essence a lack of wisdom, because what knowledge are you applying? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
One of my friends gave me a book called Critical Thinking. And when I read it, it kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that a lot of us, when we freestyle our way through our thought process, right? But we have supreme mathematics, obviously, so we uh apply that to our decision making. Not only that, in order to what we want to create and bring forth and manifest in this world, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, there's a science on critical thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that falls into that, for me, the wisdom, the discernment, the ability to uh, fact check what you know, right? Because you might know a thing, but it doesn't make a thing right and exact, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just, I wanted to just kind of add on with that, because
Yeah.
you use that word discernment, and that is so important to me, because a lot
Yeah.
of times, even people, like I said, consider themselves wise,
Yeah.
often don't show the ability to activate proper discernment when it comes to information that they read.
Yeah. And you know what? You take that back to the foundation, being scientists of life. Science comes from the Latin root sire, which means to know.
Mm,
And to know something, or to stand upon the foundation of being a scientist, you're listening, observing, and respecting phenomena.
mm,
And you're documenting what it is that you just simply see,
right, right.
and drawing your conclusion from the type of research that you're doing. Most of these people out here are not standing on the foundation of being a scientist of life. They're out here looking for evidence to support a conclusion,
Mm,
which is an assumption that they already had, which
mhm.
means they are completely blindsided by everything else that's around them. And you consistently see it. Like, a lot of times their foundation is shaky because they're starting off wrong. Their
Right,
premise is wrong.
right.
And
I
you can
got into a
easily see, you know what I'm saying? And I'll be seeing you on social media, and I'm like,
God, I be trying not to say something, God, and then
I know.
I have to, God. And I got in a conversation with a brother yesterday, and it was you again bringing up a great point. If you are researching something to and to prove something right, regardless to whom or what, that's not thinking critically, that's not showing proper discernment. It's confirmation bias. And I see a lot of people, regardless to the ideology that they claim, are so knee deep in confirmation bias that all the information that they study is only to prove what they study as correct. And whenever you
Mm-hmm.
come with, hey, but have you looked at this over here? Like, most of the times they haven't.
Mm-hmm.
When we study the science of everything in life, we have to study both sides. I remember one time he even had a build when it came to understanding about being objective and subjective, and being able to look at the data, look at the information, um, not necessarily outside of yourself, because that's somewhat impossible. We all have our own innate biases to an extent, but being able to separate do your best to separate those biases from the actual research. And then I was reading, actually it's right here. I was reading this book. It's the book of Malefi Asante, where he's kind of given a framework of combating Eurocentric thought. And a lot of the confirmation bias that we use to verify what we say we know is actually Eurocentric as hell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whenever we original people, whenever we traditionally have studied a thing, we were able to study a thing, separating it from ourselves, and then for the understanding, being a part of that thing, right? Like immersing yourself in that thing. And so yeah, you know,
And
I guess
that part of self-God, that goes back to wisdom, because that represents duality. We're able to see the whole picture, but also us within the picture. We understand that we are within this macrocosm that we call the universe, but also the universe or the macrocosm is within the microcosm. You know, and regardless of how technologically advanced we so-called get, they're gonna be an 85%.
Oh yeah,
and,
yeah.
and that's
I
what
think
we
that's a fixed
exposed
number,
to.
God.
You know, we exposed to the digital 85%.
Right. And you know, it's funny you said that too, because like even you know, because obviously, you know, original people, we're not the only ones that do that. Like in that book, whenever he was going through his framework, it's not just a book on quote unquote Kemet or you know, the study of ancient Egypt or anything like that. What he's doing is kind of drawing up on the way we did things in the past and putting it in a framework. And at that time, 1990. And so with you also being a historian, can you speak about the fact that, you know, because he kind of builds on the idea that a lot of what we study as history from European authors or European scientists, they not all, but in a lot of cases, it is, you know, they're going to be separate from the thing that they are studying as much as possible, not really citing sources from the people that live in the community that they're writing about, or even you know, collaborating with people in the community that they're writing about. And we've you know, we've even had you know, white 5%ers write about us, and I'm not saying whether what they did was how they went about it, because I'm not really familiar on that as much as I you know that, as far as that he just wrote these books. But saying that to say this, how important is it whenever you are reading and studying something to be able to personally identify where you stand in that microcosm, being a part of, you know, a whole, which is the macrocosm, and to collaborate with people who are in that community? Like, let's say somebody was going to write a book about the gods and earth. How important would it be, you know what I'm saying, to sit with us and to get that information, compared to just going off of certain writings and video clips and things of that nature?
Yeah. So you really have to take an anthropological approach towards becoming culturally competent, which means you have to immerse yourself in the culture and the people who are actually living it. And even to that extent, there's still going to be a layer or veil that you ultimately don't have access to. And being adjacent to another society or culture of people, you also have to understand that there are moments where you have to step back and recognize that people who live the culture are the primary voices, and you have to help provide that medium for them to have that actual voice. When you look at like old pictures of colonialists going to India or Africa and stuff, you see pictures of these people that's from England setting up tables in the middle of the jungle having English tea time.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, they're not immersed at all.
At all.
You
at
know, they're
all.
sitting
Right.
back and they're just documenting really mythology. So that's also something that's important to
Mm,
understand. When we approach history, we have to approach it from the perspective of historiography.
right. Right.
We have to analyze the way in which that history was actually written and all of the social and psychological circumstances around how it's actually written.
Right.
You know, I
Right.
remember some years back, I was I was in Mecca and I'm walking down 125th Street and I see this big ass bus pull up and a bunch of white people jump off the bus and a Chinese person jumps off the bus with them and they're giving a tour of the Apollo Theater and they're in awe looking at all of these different sites and they walk around the corner and they're looking at all of these different sites and they're tripping over the people who are creating these cultural institutions. They're not even looking at and
Mm,
even speaking at the very people who
mm,
create this culture.
right.
And that is the attitude that many people have about us as a people, that they love our culture, they fetishize all of the elements of our culture, they love our food, they love our music. But you know, if we could just get rid of these damn people,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
if we just if we can just not have to deal with the people,
Mm,
you know, everything will be all right. And that's the attitude that many people have, and that's not only reflected in how they interact with us as a people, but you see it literally written in the way that they document those interactions as well. And
right.
some of us are not swift enough to even perceive that.
Right.
You know, today I was looking at this interview with Tucker Carlson and
And Ice
Carson and
Cube.
Ice
Oh,
Cube.
yeah. Yeah, I know. I
Oh
know.
my God.
I
I'm
know.
like, this dude is not media trained at all. And Tucker Carlson is just throwing him alley-oops, looking for all of the sound bites that he needs in order to justify his rhetoric and use Ice Cube as the figurehead and the face of, see, I told y'all that's what it is. I told y'all this. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a disaster.
Right.
But there's many of our people who are like that
Right.
don't know how to handle those type of mediums and those platforms, realizing that who you're speaking to, Ice Cube, is not our people. You're speaking to Tucker Carlson's or whoever his name is. You're speaking to his audience.
Right. Right.
And I don't know if he realized that or if he did realize that and he's pandering for a certain purpose. But you know, it just goes back to what I said initially about being a scientist of life. You
Mm,
know, if you are studious and you're really committed to coming to the conclusion of what something actually is, even if you had a certain idea or a certain commitment prior to that, realizing that this may be an uncomfortable journey because now you may get to the point where you're going to experience some cognitive dissonance
mm,
because what you've learned is going to conflict with some of the things that you've learned or you might have been doing for a while. Now you got an attitude adjustment and you have to figure out a healthy way to integrate this new information into your life in order to grow.
right.
Even if it means you're going to be better, your quality of life is going to be enhanced, you're going to have a longer lifespan. That may be difficult for many people. So we really take a very fearless journey in terms of what we call knowledge of self.
Right.
And you know, a lot of people, and when we say 5%, that simply means that not many people are comfortable with being in these outer realms or these outer spaces of the type of religiosity and the type of indoctrination that we've been taught as a people.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
so you know, historiography is very important to examine things from the perspective, realizing that you have to look at who's writing this, what is their
Hmm.
background, what are the social circumstances at the time and the psychological things that are going on at the time, and this person writing it. And the further that you go back,
Hmm.
especially studying these so-called experts that we classify as Western giants, a lot of
Right.
them really don't have an education background.
Right.
They're no more experts than some of these people that's on YouTube.
Right.
But
Right.
because they were the predecessors of creating this system of white supremacy, they're looked at as forefathers and foremothers, and people credit them,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And like, and other terms, study the history of the history. you have to understand the context in which something was written, the people who wrote it, what were their biases. A lot of times it's funny, right? Like I asked Chat GPT, I was like, yo, I'm about to read this book. It's kind of heavy. And I was like, well, write an outline of the note of how I should take these notes. And the first thing that it gave me was to go in depth on who the author is, the author's education, what the author's, ideas and beliefs are, and things of that nature, right? And it's important because you got to know who's writing the stuff you're reading and where they're coming from, and that'll help you obviously see the biases. Um, because like for instance, there's a new book. I forgot the name of it, but he's going through the history of Africa from from hunter-gatherer societies up until now, right? And he doesn't cite any African authors, and he's kind of it's kind of touted as he's putting African history on the map. No, Sheikh Anta Diop or Dr. Ben or Obanga or none of that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that for somebody who wouldn't know any better, for somebody going back to wisdom that doesn't have that discernment, who doesn't know how to vet, because just because you don't know necessarily agree with something or understand, or you do understand that the author has a bias, it doesn't mean that you can't read the material. Just understand where he's coming from, and so when those biases show their head, you know what I'm saying, you're able to write it off as this is the author adding on some sauce, you know what I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
instead of being able, just taking everything on face value. Our lessons teach us not to do that anyway, right?
Yeah. And that
But
takes work too.
oh yeah,
And a
it
lot of
does.
people ain't willing to put that work in. We're in a society that's based on instant gratification and immediacy. And if you're using social media, you got a certain uh, letter or word count in order for you to convey a certain thought. And to go to the library
Right.
or to buy books
Right.
that's thicker than 20 pages
Right.
and to cross-reference books from different opinions to come to a conclusion, it's hard for people to even be committed to doing that if they're in an academic setting and they're going to get a degree at the finish line.
Why do you
Some
think that
people is
is,
not
God?
with doing all of that work, but you look at someone like yourself, like me, like others, we do that because that is a part of our way of life.
Right. Right.
you know
Right. And no, right and exact. And with that being a part of our way of life, it kind of is a segue into something else that I wanted to ask you.
mm-hmm.
Um, what do you think are some of the misconceptions or misunderstandings people have about who the 5%ers are?
Oh man, how much time we got?
We got some time, God. We got some time.
you know um I think first it's important to understand that um, we are a nation within a nation of people, and we are a marginalized group. We're on the fringes of society, and there's many groups who are also like that within the society, be them cultural groups, be them religious groups, the full spectrum of just being marginalized groups that are on the fringes of society, and their worldview does not represent the status quo. And whenever you have those type of power dynamics, your stories, your narrative is going to be primarily controlled by that status quo. And usually that narrative or that perspective of the status quo is not going to be accurate. It's going to be misinformation and disinformation. So as a nation ourselves, we face a lot of the same different challenges that a lot of different groups do. One is we're oftentimes categorized as being a Black supremacist group, or we may not have a background in education. we may be Muslim or we may be religious. There's a lot of different misconceptions and disinformation out there about us. But one of the things that I've strived to consistently do, and as well as yourself and many others in our nation, is to make sure that we control our own narrative and to change those power dynamics, but making sure that we present ourselves in the public domain in the most accurate way that we are.
Right.
And to combat a lot of the misinformation and disinformation out there. So there may be news stories about someone that committed a crime or whatever, and they have a 5%er name or whatever, but they will also be able to reference another news story about me and what I'm actually doing with starting a school or a human rights commissioner in my city, or something that is a complete dynamic opposite of what this news story actually represents. And that's really the only way that we're able to constantly combat a lot of the misinformation and disinformation. And then I would also say that those of us who define ourselves as the 5%, that it's important to be more intentional and conscious of how we represent ourselves in the public domain, because the growth and the development of social media puts all of us in the public domain in some capacity. And a lot of the things that we may say or do is not in the best interest of how we are represented collectively in the public domain. So I've been very intentional and conscious about that from the time I even got on social media to this very day, to make sure that if people are going to reference me and what I do, that it's going to be a positive example and representation of who we actually are as the 5%. And I would encourage other 5%ers to be just as intentional and conscious, even if they're not public figures or they may not have different things going on. The fact that you can engage social media puts you in the public domain.
Right.
It's important that people are looking at you and they're learning from you. And we want to lead people in the right direction, not in the wrong direction.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And so speaking of that, you just so tell me about the UN experience. I mean, the United Nations experience, for people who don't know, but how did that come about? What was the idea behind it? And you know, what did you get from it?
Yeah, G. So my entrance into the United Nations was an opportunity that came about when I worked on the Enslaved docuseries, executive produced and starring Samuel L. Jackson. And that series, if those of your viewers haven't seen it, it chronicles the transatlantic trade of enslaved people. It's 6 episodes, and it revolves around a team of scuba divers, an organization known as Dive In with a Purpose, that's based out of Florida. And it's a Black organization that was created in order to give a pathway for our children, Black and brown children, to learn about marine archaeology and to have access to that particular industry. Because typically many of our children don't know anything about those type of opportunities. So Diving with a Purpose was created for that specific reason. They've also been working on a project for some years, documenting and chronicling the wreckages of ships associated with the transatlantic slave trade. Right. So when I see people on YouTube or this didn't happen, it's like, yo, I've literally seen wreckages.
Right. Because, you know, I know you've seen people say, oh, where the ships at? Ain't no ships. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. So the series chronicles those journeys of documenting those wreckages, artifacts on those wreckages, and the stories associated with that. So that documentary was highlighted at the United Nations, and we screened all of the episodes at the United Nations, and we had panel discussions around it. And that was my entrance into being connected to the United Nations. From there, I began to get other different opportunities to participate in events at the United Nations as well. So once I got that opportunity, from there, I started to learn more about what was actually going on at the United Nations and to have offers to participate in other different events. So one thing about the United Nations is you don't get a lot of time in advance to prepare for certain type of events. You know, like I could get an email tonight or tomorrow morning about being at the headquarters at the United Nations next week for a certain type of event or some type of press release or something like that. You know, so that has been an experience in terms of the timing in which the United Nations operate. And it's basically a coalition of nations around the world. And it's used as a platform to not only disseminate information, but also to receive information on how we can enhance the quality of life of our human family members. As a 5%er, me having an opportunity to be in those spaces, I also represent by default for who we actually are and who we represent by being in those spaces and being able to build with different people from different places, and to learn from them as well. Just maybe about a month or so ago, we had the second session of a declaration for people of African descent. Now, what that is an initiative that was started by the General Assembly of the United Nations to focus specifically on people of African descent around the world. And we've had these various different sessions in different locations. The first one was in Geneva, Switzerland. The second one that we just had was in New York City at the general headquarters there. The next one, I think, in the spring of 2024 is going to be in Brazil.
Wow.
And the beautiful thing about it, God, is the opportunity to meet our people from different places in the world. Some places I had to actually pull up a map to find that location because I never heard about that before. And then to find out about our people living in different places and having maroon communities.
Wow.
You know, we hear about maroon communities here in the Caribbean and then also the Great Dismal Swamps in North Carolina, Virginia, and down in the Everglades and stuff. But maroon communities in other different places outside of those spaces and the history of our people there, like my mind was blown, you know, and it also expanded my perspective in terms of seeing a lot of the challenges that we face here in America. You know, one of those challenges is because as Black people living in America, a lot of us don't necessarily identify as American. We have citizenship here.
Right.
You know, but when you think about our sojourn here from 1776 all the way to 2023, over 75% of the time by law, whether that was local law, whether that was state law, regional or federal law, we were not allowed to participate in American society. We didn't have citizen rights. So many of us as a people are not very patriotic in that sense, right? And one of the challenges with our people in different places is some of the challenges that we have here, we have kind of categorized them as civil rights issues, which means we have to take it up with our own country in our jurisdiction to address. And a lot of that type of stuff is falling on deaf ears, you know, because these are internal issues that some people perceive. But when we redefine those issues as human rights, now you have our people in different places who are connected to it because that's a universal language. You know, you think about what was happening with apartheid in South Africa. The reason that things change is because those issues were defined as humans' rights abuses and humans' rights issues. So now you have the global community looking because it's like, yo, that affects all of us. But if you just say things are civil rights, people may not want to get involved because they look at it like, yo, those issues that you're dealing with internally. So we don't want to interfere. So that's one thing that I learned, that as a people, sometimes we don't properly define our issues in terms of connecting us to our human family members and our people globally. And that's also, I think, one of the disadvantages with singularly looking at a movement of just foundational Black Americans and American descendants of slaves.
Yeah,
That it's cool to look at the specificity of our issues here in America, but we have to be connected to our people around the globe because we are the global majority.
right,
We're
right.
the global
11-1.
majority. And when you talk to our people, you see the exact same things going on. They just may be speaking other languages, explaining it, but they
Right.
dealing with the same power dynamics in other places. It's no different.
And I'm glad you said that because, like, um, Malcolm in 64, whenever he, was going to Africa and different places, and then, while he was organizing the OAU, he understood the fact that our struggle was one that was international. Dr. King, he went over to Ghana in 57 for their independence with Nkrumah. He understood when he got there and was inspired by what they were doing there and their independence movement there and the civil rights movement here. Even SNCC went out there. Fannie Lou Hamer went out there. A lot of the Black Panthers went to Palestine. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of our freedom fighters that came before us, whether they started that way or, studied and saw the world enough to know that, hey, everywhere I go, there's an oppressed class, and majority of the time, the oppressed class looked like me. Even Muhammad Ali expressed that sentiment during the Vietnam War, where he's like, "Why am I going to go over there and fight these brown people when I'm catching hell over here?"
Mm-hmm.
And then we also to even take that a step further, we also know that the Bloods, the Black and vets that went over to Vietnam were experienced the same racism that they experienced whenever they left. Now they have a heroin problem that's not going to be addressed on top of that. And we see how we can be used globally at times to further, Western imperialism. But we can also, once we have that understanding, we can also speak about it, bring it to light on a global level, which I think is interesting. And I wanted to ask you about this too. Like Dr. Cordell West running for president, and I've been watching some of his his builds on different podcasts that he's come on, and I've never heard whether he feels like he can truly win or not. I do appreciate the conversation that's being had because I never heard someone of that caliber in a long time speak about Western imperialism, destroying the U.S. military complex. He's saying all of this type of stuff, right? And there has been backlash from the Democratic Party, who has, in a roundabout way, and some of them have outright said that he's a tool of MAGA because he will be taking away votes from Joe Biden. And then also I saw an article today where Joe Biden said he's, I guess, worried about black male voters coming to the polls. I mean, mind you, this is the guy that wrote the 94 crime bill that locked up a lot of our family members or people that we know in the community. But regardless, what do you
Mm-hmm.
think about, just him announcing that he was gonna, run for president, and this conversation that he's having publicly about what you were just referring to, which is, white supremacy on a global level?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, he's a doctor,
Right,
an intellectual, and
right.
the average American is not no damn intellectual.
Facts,
I
man.
would be surprised if the average American reads on a fifth grade reading level.
Right. I've
You know
actually
what I'm
read some
saying?
stuff where you might be right as far as like at a fifth grade reading level, the average American, because they don't read at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. So I think Trump's election taught us about that average American patriotic mentality. That's reflected of when we say middle America,
Mm-hmm.
we talking about the average people in this country.
Right,
You know
right,
what I'm saying?
right,
And a lot of times when you're running for public office, some people, they have different agendas of why they're actually running. Some people really believe that they can actually invigorate voters to come out and elect them.
mm-hmm.
Some people just do it because it's a campaign for them and they got a book eventually coming out, or they
Right,
have some other type of projects, programs, and initiatives that they want to get some visibility behind, and they do it that way.
right, right,
You know what
right.
I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But he would definitely take votes away from, the Democratic Party, but it's like the Democratic Party really doesn't have any viable candidates. So, I mean, what you going to do?
Right, right,
I
right.
mean, it's either going to be him or AOC or
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. And both of them are so far left that you even got conservative Democrats that's like, man, I ain't supporting them.
Right.
And the problem is, okay, by default, y'all gonna get Trump or DeSantis or somebody else elected that really speaks to the conscience. Well, I won't use the word conscience because
Because
some
what
of the stuff
conscience,
they be
right?
saying and doing, that shit is not no conscience.
Yeah. Right.
The pulse and the heartbeat of some of these middle Americans. And I'm
Hmm.
not just talking about geographically, I'm just talking about the average
Hmm.
mindset, of people here in America. And, one of the things that I did see with Trump's election is that it lowered the bar so low that
Dang.
anybody
Right.
thinks that they can run for public office and not have the decorum that is important to represent that office, whether it's local elections, whether it's state elections. He definitely encouraged any and everybody because they seen him and was like, oh, damn, I know I can do this,
Right. Right.
So
Hmm.
it's kind of a double-edged sword because you have some people that's like, yo, I know that I can do this, and they end up getting elected, and they're like a mini Trump
Oh
in
yeah.
their local municipalities and stuff. But then you
Hmm.
also have people who are inspired, like, yo, it should not be like this, and they step up.
Hmm.
Whereas before, they may have never thought about representing as a public figure locally or in their state legislature or anything like that. And they stepped up, and now you have people who are good for the citizens in their municipality. So it's been a two-edged sword,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? But I
Hmm.
think that just the political landscape itself, people more than in my recent years are more engaged in terms of looking and listening and observing what's actually going on. Denzel Washington said this quote one time. He said that if you don't watch the news, you are misinformed.
Mm.
But if you watch the news, you're disinformed.
Mm. Wow.
So what are you going to do about it?
Right. Right.
You know what
Right.
I'm
Right.
saying? And it's like that not only with the news or what we see on social media, but also with the political landscape. It's like
Well,
you have to watch it, but it's like,
so
man, what
what?
are they talking about? It's like you might have to take blood pressure medicine or something like that,
Right. Right. Right.
watching the stupid stuff that people say and do.
Right.
I'm looking at stuff that's happening in Florida right now.
Yeah,
I'm
I wanted
like,
to build on that too. It's
that's
crazy.
just insane,
Yeah.
you know?
And the fact that and somebody um who has studied the history of our enslavement, and you have obviously studied it, done uh different work locally and on TV about our enslavement in the transatlantic slave trade or the triangular trade. The idea that they could. So first, matter of fact, let me preface what I saw earlier. All right, so Nicole Hannah Jones, that wrote the 1619 project.
Mhm.
She had, I guess, actually did a deep dive into the curriculum changes in Florida, right? And
Mm.
So she went side by side about how they approach enslavement and how they approach the Holocaust. So whenever they approached the Holocaust, it was as respectful as possible. Whenever they approach enslavement, there were certain things like whenever you mention enslavers, two that must be mentioned, forgot the names of them, but they were black enslavers. Um, the only ones that you have to mention were two black people who were enslaved. She also found that um, obviously the big one that's been put out there was the idea that we benefited from our enslavement with these skills we allegedly learned, which is obviously bull because I mean I have the books that show and prove whether it be rice cultivation in the Carolinas, like we brought particular rice here to this area, right? They didn't teach us how we brought this with us, right? From different ironworks. We brought ironworks to the world. Like African ironsmiths, and metallurgy, this is our creation, right? And so many other things that like an enslaved African, created the first inoculation. You know what I'm saying? And I believe it was for smallpox. But regardless, just the idea that it has been in the 24-hour news cycle is going to be taught to babies in Florida in the public school system. Like the idea that we benefited from our enslavement, and the idea that the powers that be want to teach this to children of all races. Like whenever you take a step back and think about that, what comes to mind? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Number one, that they already been doing it.
Right.
Now they just are bold enough, because that's what Trump actually did. He emboldened a lot of people to say shit and to do things that they've always felt and thought.
Right.
And this is just an example of it. He emboldened people to say, you know what? Instead of us just doing this in a roundabout way, let's just go ahead and put it in the curriculum. They ain't gonna do nothing anyway.
Right.
What they gonna do?
Right.
What they gonna do?
Right.
And it's really incumbent upon us to do what we should have been doing to begin with, educating our own children.
Facts.
And if that means we need to pull our children out of the public school system in order to do it, or to create communes or communal schools, or to use charter schools as alternates, or private schools, or whatever aligns with what we think is what we want our children to learn about ourselves and about others and about the world, then those are the type of decisions that we need to make. Some of us have already been proactive about doing that.
Right. Yeah, you've been proactive about doing that for as long as I know you.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But it's like for many of us, it's like it's a wake-up call. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God, like, and the good thing about it is there's many of us who have already been doing this type of work who are now there like, yo,
yeah, we got alternatives.
Have the resources. We've been doing the research for generations already. We're built for this.
As somebody who has done that work and who is in education, what does a child, a Black child especially, learning that there was a benefit to his own oppression and enslavement, what do you think that does to the psyche of young Black children?
It just psychologically orientates a child to be a modern day slave. Because that was the same thing that we were being taught on plantations, that this is a benefit for us, and that it's good for us from a religious perspective. We weren't given education in that capacity, but now they doubled down on it. It's not just religious now; it's an educational curriculum that we're going to be given in order to make us as modern day slaves. My Land to School for Gifted Youngsters Because my background is in education and my focus has been on early childhood development, my main thing is, I want to get access to children, not just simply Black and brown children, but children, period, as early as possible, to be a part of the construction of their brain architecture so that I can set them on a proper trajectory to share a lot of the things that we're building on right now.
Right.
In a very primary way for them in terms of teaching them critical thinking. Yesterday, me and my students, we went on a hike. We went on an hour-long hike. And we were studying some of the plant life along the hike, studying animal life. We had a magnifying glass with us, learning different plants that could be used for medicine, or how other plants affect you if you were to ingest it. And that's just learning not only about—
And they loved it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's constructing their brain architecture. It's teaching them very early appreciation for nature, and that life is all around them, and it deserves the same respect that they deserve, and give them those life lessons as early as possible, and teach them those skills of observation. That's something that sets them on that type of trajectory, because it imprints on their brain at that early age. That's why we call, once a child gets to fifth, about 5 years, 6 years old, they get to kindergarten. That's because it's a garden. That's where you start planting those seeds. And a lot of times the seeds that are being planted, especially in the public school system, are seeds of indoctrination. They're not seeds of teaching our children to have a sense of purpose in life, or to be imaginative, or to be creative, and to think about their connection to nature, things that we've always naturally done. So I wanted to make sure that I set them on that proper trajectory as early as possible, because for the most part, they rarely come in contact with someone like me in their educational career.
Right. Oh yeah. It's and that's the thing I think that is obviously problematic about what a lot of these states are doing is there's not a you everywhere. You know what I'm saying? And whether we like it or not, there are a lot of parents who aren't capable of giving this to their children, whether it be from maybe having to work 2 jobs, or they don't have it themselves, or just being victims of white supremacy and the many forms that manifests itself. You kind of sparked the thought. You took the babies on an hour hike and showed them different things in nature, and it made me think about advancements in technology that we are experiencing now. I'm in tech, and I try to stay knowledgeable about the advancements and where it's going. And whenever most people think of civilization, they think of industrialization and things of that nature. But when we see civilization, we see it as one having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, not a savage,
not a savage, pursuit of happiness.
Right. And so when it comes to that idea and of what civilization is, some of I watch a lot of podcasts. Sometimes I'll watch Lex Friedman, because he has a lot of computer scientists on there that, I like those conversations. But a lot of the things that they go through is, a few people have gone on there and say, hey man, we need some regulation, with where this stuff is going, right? Obviously, technology can be used for good. It can be used to, fight hunger, wildlife conservation, plants, botanical life, whatever that involves and entails. But when it comes to our idea of what civilization is, and counteracted by what the idea that most people think civilization is, when it comes to technology and industrialization? How do we continue to stay advanced as far as you know, being up on innovation, but not losing our core as knowing what the meaning of civilization is? Again, for those who might not know what we're referring to in our lessons, it says that the meaning of civilization is having knowledge, understanding, cultural refinement, and not a savage in the pursuit of happiness. And that last thing, not a savage in pursuit of happiness, like the movie like Oppenheimer is out, right? I haven't seen it yet, but his science was obviously used for to further Western imperialism. But with that said, like, how do we stay advanced technology and as far as technology, build our own communities, make sure we're up on the latest innovation, but still keep the essence of who we are, and not be so disconnected with nature where we unknowingly and possibly knowingly fight against it?
Wow, that's a brilliant question, God.
Appreciate you, God.
So when we say our meaning of civilization is one having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and is not a savage in the pursuit of happiness, our perspective of civilization is an internal, personal growth and development perspective. That is the foundation for interpersonal growth and development. So we don't externalize what civilization is. Yeah, we built things. But the basis of the structures or the artifices or the different things that we constructed outside of us is reflective of what's going on inside of us.
Right.
The precision that we see of what we constructed outside of us is reflective of the precision that we've committed ourselves to in terms of building this house first.
Right.
And that's one of the things that you see that's different with the externalization or the perspective of industrialization. People may be able to build stuff externally, but how are you built internally? Where is your moral compass and your sense of ethics? When you look at Freemasonry being given to white people, it's the exact same thing. We had to utilize these tools that was used as symbolic to building King Solomon's temple or the temple of God, to show them you have to use these same tools to build this temple of God.
Right.
They had to learn that.
Right.
We've always done that. All of our sciences of life, whether you're talking about classical civilizations or indigenous societies, it was an internal journey of growth and development in terms of getting ourselves aligned with what is going to be going on externally.
Right.
We have to start here first. So the way we teach is the exact same way that our ancestors have always taught. Get your house together first.
Right.
Before you go out here trying to build something else.
Right.
And with these exponential growths in technology, that doesn't correct the moral compass or the ethics that people are committed to, that's creating this technology. And that's why you consistently see the issues and the problems, and they're talking about regulations and all this other stuff. The regulations that people talk about that need to be brought about technologically is the exact same regulations that people invent when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry. And what I mean by that is we've always practiced natural traditions of a sense of self-regulation and control. That's what fasting is. That's what meditation is. That's what yoga is. That's what all of these various different techniques that we've always incorporated into our lives are for.
Right.
In Western society, they just invent pills to cut off the communication of the brain to the body, or to self-regulate with different type of things that you can take, basically chemical straitjackets.
Wow.
That is their approach. Let's cut off communication with the brain to the body to regulate people, not teach people how to regulate themselves through these various different techniques.
Right.
You see the exact same thing running current through the technological. It's the exact same approach. Instead of teaching people to have this moral compass and a sense of ethics and growing a person internally, Because there's things like you said, you in the tech industry, there's things you ain't doing and that you're
Right.
not going to do
Not gonna do. Right.
because you're not orientated that way. You don't need no regulations
Right. Right.
because your sense of civilization.
Right.
You have people who live in this capitalistic society. They're not thinking about nothing like that.
Mm-mm.
They thinking about being
Big
paid
money. Mm-hmm.
and making themselves rich off the labor of others and keeping
Mm-hmm.
people blind to whatever it is that they're doing. And they're not thinking about the ethics or the sense of morality with what it is that they're actually creating. So now, if you have white people who are even saying, yo, we need to put regulations on this, then you know it's foul if they're
Yeah.
even saying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because for
Yeah.
the most part, they're not striving to grow children that have the type of moral compass and the sense of ethics where they're not even going to try to do certain things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what we're more interested in and invested in.
Right.
When I was growing up, my parents never taught me what to be. They didn't say you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. They always taught me how to be, to have certain principles and values that you bring to any space that you go into and how you treat people and how you treat yourself.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that just aligns with what we also teach in the 5% in terms of the meaning of civilization.
Yeah, God, that's extremely profound. What you build will be a reflection of what's going on inside of you, your thought process, and how you view the world. And I've noticed that one of the things that made me ask that question was not only the fact that you teach these type of things to your students, but sometimes I see the argument that is made by a lot of white supremacists that we didn't contribute much to civilization, which obviously we know is incorrect. But what they use, the idea that they use is the industrialization that has occurred in quote unquote modern times. And to say also we know that we were a part of that as well. But let's just say, with that idea of what they have, it seems like they're not making the connection that this quote unquote industrialization that you are saying that you're extremely proud of and this is your mark on the world has actually been terrible for the world. And that inner compass, that compass that you spoke about, that idea of I'm going to work on me before I'm going to build my own house before I start building others, right? That idea is it's lost on them, right? They for the most part, because what they it's even the idea of guns, like like the Asians had gunpowder and were using in celebrations for using fireworks and things of that nature. European got it and made weapons of destruction. You know what I'm saying? It's a idea of who you are, and I appreciate you for expounding on that. But that idea of who you are will always reflect on what you build is a powerful one. And I think, I just definitely want the listeners and the viewers to just contemplate and ponder that idea. What you build, you're the maker and the owner of, and what self is and what you are is going to be reflected in that. And so I definitely appreciate you expounding on that. The last thing that I kind of wanted to ask you is I haven't gone yet, but it's definitely in my plans, my short-term plans. But what was it like going to Africa, God? And what did you like? Did it evolve your understanding about just who we are as a people and just if you can just explain your trip for me.
Oh man, God, it radicalized me in a way that I didn't expect. It took me maybe about 4 months to eat a banana here in America.
Wow.
After eating bananas there, because I was
Totally
staying at a banana farm that grew like 15 different type of bananas in Tanzania.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
didn't even know it was 15 different
I
type of
didn't
people.
either. I didn't either.
You know what I'm saying?
Golly. Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like I didn't know that this existed. You know what I
Mm.
mean? The place I stayed was an organic farm, so they were growing everything. They had red eggplants. I didn't even know red
I didn't
eggplants
either.
exist.
Me either,
They had
dog.
like 3 different types of mangoes growing, all kinds of fruits, vegetables. The property itself was powered by methane gas that was extracted from cow dung.
Wow.
And it was about 70
Pure
acres right
organic.
at the foot of a place called Mount Meru. And Mount
Mm.
Meru had a natural spring that came down from the mountain where you can literally just drink the water.
Mm. That sounds like heaven, God.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and all kinds of different plants that had, used for different type of medicines. I'm like, this, yeah, it radicalized me, you know. It's the first time in my life that I ever felt comfortable sitting with my back to the door. I don't
Mm.
do that here.
Right,
I
right,
gotta
right.
sit
I
and
got
look
this.
at
Yeah, I got to be able to see them
accents.
coming through.
Yeah, but that
Mm.
was the first time I ever felt comfortable doing that
Mm.
because I didn't feel any threats of violence or aggression. And
Right.
that was just the social norm of our people there.
Mm.
That wasn't something that people did. People didn't argue and yell at one another. I didn't see road rage
Right.
there. I didn't see people fighting or anything like that. And that was not something that wasn't a social norm there.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
one of the things that I've consistently shared since I've been back is when you look at the landscape of America, it represents a little over 1% of the square mileage of this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't really even explore America.
Or their own city. God.
Yeah, yeah. Which
Mm.
means they don't even really they explore less than 1% of the entire planet,
Mm.
which also means that psychologically, social, economically, their goals, their visions, their hopes, their aspirations in life only exists within less than 1% of this entire planet.
Wow.
And the same way that we may see some people in our neighborhoods that don't even leave the block,
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective, America is a block.
Right. Right.
It's a block.
Right.
And if we can't see outside of that or beyond that, then we're limiting ourselves to our goals, our aspirations, our hopes, our possibilities.
Mm.
So that's one thing that I definitely encourage people to do. You don't necessarily have to go to the continent of Africa. I would encourage it,
Mm-hmm.
but go someplace else as well,
Right.
especially where you see our people in the majority, Black
Right.
and brown people, and immerse yourselves in the culture and to learn the perspectives of our people in different places. It'll give you a totally different perspective on what's going on in America, how to attend this society or attend this world. At one point, I felt a little bit more encouraged to share or to speak about certain things. And I do definitely to my students, but for a lot of adults, I don't feel the same sense of urgency to say or to share or to say certain things anymore
Mm.
from having that experience. You know,
Wow.
I'm going back to Africa soon,
Right.
and I'm bringing 9 people with me.
Dope.
9 people were interested in traveling. They're from all around the country,
Mm.
and not only do I want them to have that experience, but I want to know how they're going to process experiencing this and then coming back to America.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, God, because I hear that a lot of people, when they come back, there's somewhat of a sobering feeling. Like you just, all right, so you just said that, that's the first place where you felt comfortable sitting with your back towards the door. And then you come back here to where there's racialized violence everywhere, not saying that white supremacy doesn't affect Africa, because obviously we know that it has through colonialism and the extraction of its resources. But as far as just everyday society and being among your people whenever you were there,
Mm-hmm.
when you got here, did it kind of because I know you were already aware of the ills that we face here, but did it kind of highlight them from like as a type of contrast from being in something that sounds like the Garden of Eden in Tanzania
Yeah.
to America and what we have gone through here.
Yeah. So one reason I went to Tanzania is also because uh, they had history of colonialism there, but they don't have a history of a bunch of tribal warfare. So there's
Right.
over 100 tribes that live there, and they don't have a long history of tribal conflict.
Mm,
So even though you had our people from different tribes, you saw a level of collective work and responsibility that I haven't seen in many other places. And experiencing that and then coming back to America, one of the things I realized is America exists because people believe in it.
right. Right.
There's not a lot of resources that America produces here that they export to other places.
Right.
We're not producing gold here, or we're not producing lumber and coal and all of these other things that is something that we're exporting to the biggest export of America is cultural ideology.
Right.
And we as a people are the driving force behind that cultural ideology, and we don't really own it like that. So there's a lot of us who have been made other than ourselves, like we know, and don't realize the type of power that we have in shaping what America actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I think about different celebrities who have gone to Africa, or entertainers or whatever, and I've had this question like, damn, like when I went the first time, I was looking for land. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like realizing the importance of creating that type of uh, relationship with our people there, and the resources that we have here in America to be able to help finance my freedom, and to use that as a platform to help our people finance their freedom there as well. Like, and that was my thought process. And when I look at other people, it's like, as you become a celebrity and you're so invested in America, and they're really paying you to be a brand ambassador of American culture and
Right.
ideology.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's something that you are aware of, things that we see, but to see it from a different vantage point of view, it helped me realize that even those of us who call ourselves conscious and nationalistic and everything, a lot of us ain't really making moves like that. We still believe in American capitalism. And as long as we being paid, we by default become brand ambassadors for American cultural ideology. And we're not really striving to be liberators like that. We ain't striving to build a home nowhere else, or to be a facilitator of creating those type of opportunities for our people here as well as abroad. We ain't making no moves like that, because we're really being paid to be brand ambassadors to promote America, because America thrives on this myth of what America actually is, but we really don't have nothing over here.
Right. Right.
And people from other places that actually are conscious and aware, they realize that America is just really a myth. It's just those of us here that just believe in something that does not even exist. And there's many of our own people who are selling our own people this type of idea. You look at people like Jay-Z or Beyonce, or a lot of our people that are huge here in America. They could easily just pull the plug and just go somewhere else and just live in an entirely different country and still create a platform or some way to facilitate growth opportunities for our people here in America. And I say that to say, without leaving our people behind.
Right.
They can do things without leaving our people behind.
Right.
But a lot of our people that are in certain positions of power are not really committed to that kind of form of liberation.
Yeah.
You know
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. For sure. You're right. That's a great point. It's more you're the fact that they are being brand ambassadors of the mythology or the religion of the United States. And when I say religion of the United States, I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm talking about the myth and the cultural, like you said, the cultural export that has become what this idea of America has. A lot of times it's more about upholding that than it is actually building something tangible. I was looking at um, um, a lot of some leaders in the Caribbean and how they are building these bridges to Africa, these air bridges, getting these contracts with different, African or Caribbean, um, um, uh, I guess, airline companies, and making it easier for one another to go back and forth. Because even the idea of traveling in the United States is, from what I have read and been told by people in other countries, is made harder here because that idea of American exceptionalism is
Hmm.
killed once you go somewhere else. There are
Yeah.
people can travel from Europe to Africa way cheaper than, or Europe to wherever, or just from different. From what I was told, I have to verify this, but I was told that
Yeah.
international travel is more expensive in America, and it's done that way purposefully. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because, like, once you go somewhere and see your people and how they're living, and the communal aspect of certain communities and the love that you get, man, just that
Oh
feeling,
yeah.
man, like
Yeah.
that can, like you said, that can radicalize you and change
Yeah.
your worldview. American exceptionalism, in my opinion, is what it is because of the fact that, as you mentioned, we've only seen 1% of the world.
Yeah.
um we don't really have a world view. We have an American view. No matter how many books, even myself, how many books that I've read about things that are happening in our history all over the world, I haven't seen any of it, right? I haven't experienced it. I've I've understood these concepts from other people's experience, but
Hmm.
until I get to experience it myself,
Yeah.
my worldview will still be somewhat Americanized. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like when you have the opportunity to travel, I can kind of say with a sense of kind of a surety that the first place that you want to go is not probably France
Facts,
or
facts,
England.
facts. I'm
You know what
going.
I'm saying?
I'm going to Africa,
You
God.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you have love for our people,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the way you're orientated. So our people have the highest value in terms of your priorities. There's
Mm-hmm.
many of our people that have the same type of opportunities, but they would rather go to France, or they're gonna go on a cruise to
Mm-hmm.
Greece, and
Yeah.
they ain't really trying to go to no Africa like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Or the same cost that it is for a flight to get to Africa, they would rather buy some Gucci stuff,
Yeah, that's true.
or some Beyonce tickets or whatever. People prioritize what they see in terms of what their sense of importance is. And the
That's true.
highest value a lot of times goes back to what you were saying about just being materialistic or indoctrinated into this myth of what America actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I seen people planning, like, when people were asking me about going to Africa and everything, they asked me like what travel agent I went to and everything. I'm like, no, I didn't. I just went.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
just
yeah,
went. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's affordable. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
Tanzanian shilling that they use there, I just checked the other day, and it was about $2,400 to one of ours.
Wow.
So there's power in not only our dollar when you go to those places, but it's also how you utilize your dollar when you go to those places.
Right.
So a lot of our people, when they're in Latin American countries or Africa, and they say it's a dream for them to come to America, a lot of times it's because of their currency being devalued, and just it seems like they literally would have to save their entire life in
Mm.
order to get a plane ticket
Right.
to come to places like America. Whereas us over here, people be spending that at STK in Atlanta for dinner.
Facts. Facts.
You know what I'm saying? Or
Facts.
or popping bottles at this strip club or everything else. but that's the way that we choose to spend, our capital, and that's the way we orientate it. I'm just orientated a little different. You know
Indeed.
what I'm saying? But
Indeed.
that goes back to just our sense of identity and self-love. And I think that the more we teach our children in particular to have that sense of self-love, that they'll grow and have the same kind of orientation you do and the way you teaching your children and my children and others, so that they understand the importance of connecting with our family globally.
Indeed. God,
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate you for coming through, man. It's always a
Mhm.
pleasure to build with you. Definitely the insight and understanding.
Yeah.
If For those that want to continue, who aren't already following you on any
Mhm.
type of social media or your blog and all of the things that you got going, how can they keep up with what's going on with you?
Oh, peace, God. I appreciate you too. And like I said before, having this type of platform so that those of us can come here and build. Um, they can just Google the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters.
Mm.
Also on YouTube, they can just put in Atlantis Build, and then Atlantis Build is also my handle on Instagram, as well as X, not Twitter, but
X.
X. Yeah.
That's so
So
crazy now, but
yeah. So for the most part, I don't really do a lot of things in my
Mhm.
personal name.
Yeah.
I do a lot of things that are reflective of my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters, because that is really the central location of all of the various different things that I do.
Indeed. Well, again,
Mhm.
God, appreciate all the work that you do.
Mm.
Teaching the babies, uh, the community work, the representing us at the United Nations, the representing us on major documentaries. Hey God, we definitely appreciate you, and you're an
Man.
excellent representative of what we teach. So peace to the God.
Peace, God. I appreciate that. And when I get back from Africa, I want to come on again
Oh
so I can
yeah,
share more about.
yeah.
And then, have you ever done this with more than one person,
No,
like multiple
yeah, a couple
people?
of times. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You can bring everybody back. Bring everybody that goes with you back.
Yeah, because that might be good. So you can get a chance to hear their personal experience
Ah,
of
that'll be
how our
perfect.
journey was.
We'll have the welcome home party at Wilds of Dome.
Oh, that'll be peace, God. I appreciate that.
No doubt, God.
Yeah.
Peace to the God.
Peace, God.